Nike is suing the shoe surgeon, and I have a confession to make, this time on Fire Footwear. Welcome back to Fire Footwear, everybody. As always, this is your host, Matt Frates. I want to welcome you if this is your first time, and I want to say thank you for everybody who has stuck with me through thick and thin. Last week, I did not come out with an episode because I'll be honest with you, things were a little bit weird in Casa Frates, and I just really wasn't in the mood. And sometimes as indie podcasters, indie content creators, we just aren't in the mood to make content. Doesn't mean that I don't want to do the show. It just meant that last week wasn't really my best week, so I needed a little bit of a break. It was an unintended break, but a break nonetheless. And we are back this week. And in that break, though, and this happens a lot, if I take a little bit of time to really stew about what I want to talk about, I realized that I needed to do an episode that sort of made amends and talked about something that is very, very hot right now in the sneaker space. So I opened the episode talking about how Nike was suing the shoe surgeon. We've talked about that loosely, and I mean we talked about GoYard suing the shoe surgeon for the way he was representing their brands and their materials and so forth. And in that episode, I think that I misunderstood the entirety of the lawsuit. And I want to give a special shout out to my man Sockjig because he has been covering this in a way that I haven't really seen anybody else cover it. One of the things I think is important about being a voice, about having a platform, always, no matter what, is that you should be willing to go back and look at things that you've said and things that you have put out in space and be able to get new information and say when you're wrong or say when you've thought something that really wasn't incorrect or wasn't fully formed. And that's where my man Sock really comes in because he is doing the hardest work. Now, in the episode that I did 2 weeks ago about content creators, I gave him a special shout out there too. And I talked about how much work he's putting in and how well crafted his content is. And I think that he's doing something that a lot of other people aren't doing. And it's something that I try to do on this pod too, is dig deeper and give you different opinions than you're going to get in a lot of different places. Because let's be honest, out in sneaker content, there are a lot of people who have formed relationships with other people in the space and are not willing to put themselves out there for fear of either ruining a relationship, ruining a sponsorship, or hell, maybe even ruining the audience that their show provides them. And I'm not saying that about anybody specific, but let's take the shoe surgeon, for example. So when I talked about it, I don't know, maybe a month ago, actually it's probably longer than that, it was probably 2 months ago, I talked about how it felt dangerous to me. And I talked about the danger being in when is Nike going to draw the line in when they are going to decide to sue creators and customizers and the like. And that's where my confession comes in because it's a lot more nuanced than that. I think on a surface level, everybody would agree that customization has a place in sneaker culture. I don't think that there's anybody who's going to say that one-of-one customizers or somebody who wants to use their artistic vision to make something for a friend, even if that is a high-profile friend, is going to say that that's a bad thing inherently. What I didn't understand at the time, and am just now coming to understand after conversing with Sock and also doing some research, some things that he sent me, is the fact that this was a lot larger than I even understood. That what the shoe surgeon was doing was feigning a service of some kind in the name of one-of-one customizations. Now, I believe that at one point in time, the shoe surgeon, who has a real name, who I can't think of now, was doing it as an artistic project, was doing it because his creativity allowed him the ability to do that, right? To create custom sneakers that people thought were fire. And I think that was all well and good back in the day. I think like most things, when it becomes super profitable, and that's where things change. And I think that they changed for the worse for him because the larger that this got, the more expensive it got for the consumer. And I also think that what ended up happening was, as most big ventures do, as he started to scale up, he had to meet the economies of scale. And how did he do that? Well, he needed factories to produce this. Now, I think that the reason why this is problematic, well, there's more than one, but a big reason why this is problematic is because I think, at least openly, the shoe surgeon, in my opinion, was selling the idea still that he was making one-of-one customs, when what was really happening was he was charging exorbitant fees. One of them was called a sourcing fee to be able to go out and get these materials and make these shoes. However, when I think about it now, he's making these quote-unquote custom shoes that are still using branding of a copyrighted item. And Nike has so many trademarks and patents out there that if you're using the swoosh, which is one of the most recognizable symbols in the entirety of the world, obviously that's going to get Nike's attention. I think where this got a little bit complicated over the years is the fact that Nike sort of, at least to us, the regular consumer, sort of took a step back and didn't say anything publicly about the high-profile customs that he was giving out to athletes and celebrities and how much traffic that was getting them, how much traffic on social media that was getting them. And I think he was actually giving Nike a lot of business. However, it just kept growing and growing and growing. And that's where the problem is. And how do I feel about that? Well, first, what I need to say is that I was wrong in my initial assessment. And not necessarily wrong in the fact that I had the hottest of takes and I thought that Nike was ridiculous. I still think at its core, the idea of customizers being sued and not allowed the freedom to make shoes is still something that could be dangerous, because I do think that there are people who are going to see sneakers and see the shoes that we're getting, but also have their own ideas. And Nike is not allowing those ideas to come to the forefront, to get to the assembly line. And there are probably people out there who have given Nike ideas that they have used that are not getting the credit that they deserve. And so I think it still is dangerous at the highest of levels. But when you break it down and you start to really get into the weeds of this, I do think that Nike has a very, very valid point. And I think that what I now understand is that Nike isn't just out for their bottom line. And we all know that they are in some form or fashion. But what they're trying to protect is the brand itself, because a guy like this, who is now mass producing what are considered or largely considered fake shoes, is making a ton of money. I think the number that I saw was somewhere in the neighborhood of $60 million. Think about that for a second. If you're listening to this right now, think about doing something that could get you that kind of money. That is life-changing money. It is generational wealth, no matter how you slice it. And obviously, he wants to keep this going. The unfortunate part, though, is that he has conned a lot of people into believing, number one, that Nike was okay with all of this from the get-go. And I think that they turned a blind eye, very similar to the way that MLB turned a blind eye during the home run chase of '97 when steroids were rampant and all that. And then, 10 years later, 5 years later, they decided, nope, we need to crack down on this. I think there is a little bit of hypocrisy on Nike's part for that, because I think that they turned a blind eye while watching a lot of the traffic come their way. But I also believe that he, the shoe surgeon, was really performing all of these acts in bad faith, because while he had sort of what you can consider a wink-wink agreement, it wasn't fleshed out. He didn't have full permission to do exactly what he was doing on the level that he was doing, charging the prices that he was charging. So the people that have this kind of income, and this is disposable income, folks, like the amount of money that he was charging for these shoes, these lookalike Dior's and things, I'm not going to sit here and tell you that he didn't source the proper materials, that he didn't take time to decide how these were going to be crafted. It's just that he's not the one crafting them. A factory was crafting them. It became almost like producing Nikes themselves. And that's where I think the biggest issue is the counterfeit nature of it and the faking of it. And I'm always going to have a problem with that, because I've always said, and I said in a video that I posted recently about Nike suing replica sneaker companies, is that if you try to sell reps or fakes as retails, you're kind of the scum of the earth. And I think when I've dug into this a little bit more and I've gone on the internet and looked at opinions in both directions, one of the things that I find is that a lot of people don't want to say anything negative about it. Now, do I hope that both parties come out with a reasonable outcome? Yes, because in the end, Nike is going to make its money regardless of whether they win this lawsuit or not. The shoe surgeon, on the other hand, may lose all of his livelihood. And maybe you think that he deserves that, and that's fine. You can certainly say that. But I think at the end of the day, you hope that reason and logic come out and that in the end, we get a reasonable outcome and that customization still has a place in the culture, but also something like this is a lot more regulated because people should not be paying these prices. People should not be putting this money out to get something that they think is one of one, when really it's just a mass-produced copy. I think that he got greedy. I think that he got caught, and Nike is trying to get something back for it because I think that all of these shoes that have come out have represented something of lost wages because people are now going to him for a product that looks just like a Jordan 1 or just like a Nike Dunk, except it's using different materials. They're not going to Nike for these products. And so I think that now is the right time to come out and say this because everybody's talking about it. And I also believe that this is a great opportunity to tell you, my listening audience, when I mess up or when I have an opinion that isn't well informed. And before we get to the release of the week, I also want to say that it's going to happen. Over the course of this podcast, we're coming up on 3 years of doing this for the most part outside of a very small window that I was gone. And look, I've had opinions that I go back and listen to and think, man, that was bad, or oh boy, that was cringe. It's going to happen. We can't always have the right opinions all the time. And when we're doing this in terms of having a job and having kids and everything, sometimes things are going to fall through the cracks. I'm not going to do the best research. Sometimes I have time to do it. Sometimes I don't. And sometimes a topic comes up that I want to get out there because it's something that I feel a way about, and I want to get it out there to stoke this discussion. And in this particular case, I got it out there. I think that my point wasn't invalid. It just wasn't well crafted enough. And that's something that I strive for. And that's one of the things, again, I'm going to shout out Sock for this because he's helping me by doing what he does, be a better podcaster, be a better content creator, and always challenge my mindset. And those are the types of people and creators that I want to be around. And like I said last time, if you're not listening to him, please go do that. Not only does he support this show, but he does a lot for the culture. Things like this, you're going to learn a lot. I've learned a lot, and I hope that you learned a lot. And I hope that by listening to this, you understand that as we go through this journey together, that I'm going to come out and tell you when I've had a bad opinion, or I'm going to come out and tell you when, hey, I really need to rethink this because that's what this is all about. But I promised you something earlier, and before we get to the end of the episode, let's get to the release of the week. Release of the week, where I like to highlight a shoe that has caught my eye. It's not always hype. Sometimes it is. It's just something that I want you to know about. It is that special time every 4 years, in this instance, every 3 years, where one of my favorite events comes back around, and that is the Summer Olympic Games. Now, I love the Olympics in general, but the Summer Olympics just have a different appeal. I think there's just something about all those games. There are more things that I think we can relate to, swimming, running, things like that. And obviously now you're going to see a huge influx of USA or Olympic inspired shoes. And so I think that it's a perfect time with the opening ceremonies happening Friday night that we highlight a shoe here. So this is the Sporty and Rich Adidas Samba OG USA. It is a plain colorway. It is white. It has that off-white suede on the toe cap. It's got 2 blue stripes, 1 red stripe. It looks clean. It is clean. However, I think this is a great looking shoe, so if you want to get patriotic, that is your time. I would love to know what you think about this lawsuit with the shoe surgeon, and I want to know if you think that I have come to the right conclusions and I have done the right research. First things first, if you want to call and give me your opinion or give me a sneaker story, I would love to highlight it on a future episode. The voicemail for this podcast is area code in the US 202-643-9170. I would love to hear from you, and again, highlight your story or your opinion on a future episode of the podcast. If you want to follow me on Instagram, @FireFootwearPod is the handle. We have a group chat there. I would love to add you, and we just talk sneakers all day long. How could you hate that in any way? If you want to email me some questions, firefootwearpod@gmail.com. If you want to watch some reels on TikTok, @FireFootwearPod. And of course, if you're listening here in the audio space, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, I would love a subscribe. I would love a review and a rating. I got a really, really great review from somebody a couple weeks ago. I still read it. It makes me feel good. If you have been listening for a while and you've been silent, now's your time. Get a review out there, and I would love to hear it. I would love to see it. And I just really appreciate everybody sticking with me through this 2 weeks off and through just everything that goes on. You guys are the best. What can I say? I have one of the best audiences out there. It continues to grow, and I am forever grateful. Hope everybody is having a great summer, and I hope this finds everybody well. Hope this finds everybody safe, and I'll talk to you next week with a little bit of Olympics talk. This is Fire Footwear. The opinions and viewpoints expressed on Fire Footwear are those of Matt Frates and his guest, and not necessarily those of the Matty Ice Media Network. Fire Footwear is exclusively owned by Matt Frates and is brought to you by the Matty Ice Media Network.